Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Fel the Blythe. I'm your local pagan person. I don't know. I don't know why I sound like that. And today we're going to talk about things that people don't tell you about being a solitary practitioner. I first started on this unconventional spiritual path when I was 13 years old. Everything seemed magical, scouring the internet late at night and scrawling spells into a binder. I brought playing cards with me to a camp and I read them secretly. I divined my own way of reading them. My early days of being solitary were filled with this magic, both physically and spiritually in this emotional sense. It was as if everything was possible. There was another realm, a metaphysical one, just beyond my reach. Then as I grew up, I experienced religious trauma, depression, the pandemic, moving, stress upon stress, and somewhere along the line, it felt like the magic died. What was left was not just silence, but loneliness. This video is part of a conversation, a candid, compassionate look at this experience that is not really all that uncommon. I want to share some of my tips for those currently in this space or thinking about entering it. But before I get into identifying the struggles and how to deal with them, I want to address the reason why you might be a solitary practitioner in the first place. I would say there are generally two reasons that do intersect of why you might be solitary in this path. That would be by circumstance or by choice, or in many cases, a mixture of both. First, I want to be completely transparent. I fall generally into the former category of solitary by circumstance. I have plenty of friends who are, and plenty of creators that I know who made the active choice to be solitary. And if that's you are also allowed to feel lonely. Humans are naturally socially oriented, so that is also okay. Let's cover that first situation, solitary by circumstance. In my case, I didn't start solitary. I was part of an art high school. There was a lot of alternative spiritualities that were born there. We actually had ritual parties or meditations during lunch. We exchanged crystals. We swapped spiritual tips and did readings for each other. Now, the group of us at the time were definitely far more new age than anything else. And part of why I became solitary was because I moved away from that side of things, both literally moving to college and then also moving away from the new age practice. We began to diverge spiritually, so I didn't mesh in with them as much anymore. When you start out or become solitary by circumstance, it might be because of several reasons. One, you live somewhere where no one aligns with you spiritually. The reason I say that is I personally live very close to a witchy city. However, I don't identify with most of those practices. So even if that area is very accepting and very pro alternative spiritualities, you just might not vibe with them. Social anxiety or other issues that prevent you from reaching out to others. I've also experienced this with, I used to have really bad social anxiety. It's much better now, but I still have ADHD, which means that while I don't struggle necessarily to reach out to people, I can struggle to follow up with them. Simply not having the time. I have 3 jobs, not including content creation. I am lucky that I know like 2 other Hellenic polytheists in real life in my area. Hot Hellenic polytheists in your area. We should take that out so we know where to find each other. However, I'm a very busy gal, as are both of my Hellenic polytheist friends. I barely have enough time for my own practice as is, let alone meeting up with someone else. Another issue could be that you're not allowed to practice or feel pressure to remain solo. Maybe it's even dangerous for you to be out as a practitioner because of your family or your community. Now, circumstance and choice do intersect for me, so let's cover why you might be solitary by choice if that happens to be you. Maybe you have past religious trauma. I capture my whole story in a vlog. I'll link that above. But for me, I was staunchly solo in college on purpose because I was reeling from cult-based trauma. I had a very hard time emotionally doing anything spiritual with someone who wasn't me. Oh God, I hear the trash men coming. The trash man cometh to ruin my video once more. You might want the freedom that being solitary entails. You don't have to check in with anyone, just your spirits or a part of your practice. You don't have to worry about settling arguments about praxis. Privacy and silence is an important part of your practice. Some rituals and some practices call for silence and privacy. There's this belief that when something is kept secret, it is kept powerful. Perhaps that's the case for you. For me, there are aspects of my practice that I keep silent, not out of gatekeeping in the sense of I don't want you to know, but in the sense of I have made a promise to a deity to keep this part of my practice just between me and them. If you have any other reasons why you chose to be a solitary practitioner, please pop them in the comments below, or another reason why you might be solitary by circumstance. The emotional struggles of being solitary. Whether you choose to be solitary or are solitary by circumstance, you might find yourself hit with this feeling of loneliness, and you might not even realize that you're lonely. Loneliness is a big word that I'm really just sort of grasping the true magnitude of it, because loneliness isn't a lack of people. People say that you can be lonely in a crowded room, which is very true. It's a lack of meaningful connection. One can feel both human-based loneliness, but also spiritual loneliness. Human loneliness, obviously, is that lack of meaningful connection with other human beings. Spiritual loneliness then figures that it's a feeling of lack of meaningful connection with the divine. They can also compound each other. Perhaps it feels like you're talking into the void, and then if you have no one physically around you, there's no one to check realistically against. You can't say, hey, I'm feeling like Aphrodite's not listening to me. And someone can check you and say, hey, well, remember when you made that offering and then you got that job, for example. There's someone there to help back you up and help get you out of your own head. And then you're just left for online comparisons, which, as we know, both in the mundane life and in the spiritual life, generally what you're seeing online is a highlight reel. It also could be perhaps that you are connecting with the divine, but sometimes there's just no one to share that excitement with, and those around you just don't get it. I have been there too, especially before I became a content creator. It was just me, basically. A lot of my friends are pagans, but many weren't at the time the same way as me. Or like if something exciting happens and I arrive at work, I'm not going to start talking about stuff at work in that sense, because that's not an appropriate place for it. So you can feel that that part of yourself is invisible to others. And if you do try to share it, then you're explaining things over and over again, which sucks. Honestly, for me, sometimes I don't talk about my spirituality because I'm so tired of explaining it. But when people are genuinely interested in listening, good listeners can tell like when you're tired of explaining versus when you're okay with explaining something. There's a reason why spiritual communities spring up. We don't like feeling isolated and we like being understood. Even if you're in a community that's spiritually diverse, if there's no one in your particular path, you sometimes feel like you're better off alone. And then on the days when you're down and you feel that you're speaking to no one, there's no one really to build you back up and support you. Now, the practical struggles. Loneliness is not just an emotional feeling, but a physical circumstance for many. And it also poses many practical consequences, especially when you're starting out. Pagan practices are, for better or for worse, primarily self-taught in today's day and age. There are people who are born into alternative spiritual practices, but for the vast majority of us, that is not the case. This is a beautiful aspect of this practice, honestly. The ability to teach yourself and to initiate yourself is genuinely one thing that I really love about being a pagan. Just curled up with a book on paganism in the corner of Barnes & Noble is one of my fondest memories of early days of my practice. However, It can with the internet, and not even just the internet. I had plenty of misinformation when I still had dial-up. It can also lead to the internalization and the spreading of misinformation. Like I said, I started out New Age, and there was definitely a lot of weird stuff that we taught each other about angel numbers and chakras that, of course, now I've moved away from entirely. So with that, you're in the World Wide Web of conflicting experiences and opinions. And I know for me, I found this overwhelming when I was really young, and I still find it overwhelming. The amount of times I was looking up something that wasn't even related to paganism or spirituality at all. It was just like some anecdote about the Victorians being freaks as usual. And there was one quote on Wikipedia, I don't even know if I want to say it because it's kind of inappropriate, about aristocrats having unique parties. This particular aristocrat, the guy who was the mentor of Queen Victoria, it doesn't matter. And my partner and I spent a long time trying to find the source of the quote, but we ended up in a quote rabbit hole where they were all just quoting each other, and it seems to come back to this one source who doesn't actually have a source, and there's no other corroborating evidence. I can only imagine what that's like when I don't even have to imagine. I remember in my Hecate's Daepnon video, which I'll link above, I went down this massive rabbit hole over Carnips. Like, it's like finding a needle in a haystack, trying to find a source, and there might not even be a needle in the haystack. That's a whole minefield, and I can understand that it can be off-putting to people, and people will just settle for information. Because I don't believe that everyone's calling is to be a researcher. While I believe it's important to check your sources, not everyone wants to spend 5 hours on the internet trying to find the source for the Hecate's Daepnon offerings. And even for me, I ended up, speaking of spiritual communities, having to reach out to several people to help me because I'm not a professionally skilled researcher. All that to say, it's a lot. That's one aspect, right, where a community comes in handy is you're able to check each other and literally check your work. Also, for me, it can be super hard to stay consistent without accountability. My ADHD thrives on accountability and structure. So it's easy for me to skip offerings, and then that leads to forgetting to pray and spiritual burnout and slowly falling out of the habit. And if you decide to do a bunch of rituals, then you can experience ritual fatigue. I have been there. I tend not to do as many rituals right now because I just don't have the emotional capacity for it. But when I did a lot of rituals, my God, when I did them by myself, I would sometimes wonder, like, I'm designing this, I'm running the ritual, I'm gathering all the materials. It felt like I wasn't even able to experience it. You start to wonder, why am I even doing this, especially if it's compounded by spiritual loneliness. Without a physical community, you are confined to the space that you have. Processing with a statue around your studio apartment is not quite the same as processing through a backyard, even with just one other person. All right, so what about what's helped me cope? This is an interesting question because on the surface, right, it seems to have a super straightforward solution. Build a physical community or find one. But obviously, that's so much easier said than done. This wouldn't even be a topic of conversation, right? If you could just snap your fingers and build a spiritual community. I want this section to be about how to build meaningful connections that builds you up spiritually, even if you don't have access to someone in your exact spiritual niche. Obviously, the first thing I would suggest would be online communities. I will link the Discord below with a new join link to Eros Alliance, where I am part of the moderator team, and it's a really great community. There's some really amazing researchers on there. A lot of those people have been a cornerstone of helping me discern where to look for things and also gently call me in if I've gotten something wrong. So I really appreciate that community. It's really, really great. I think you should go check it out. There's also plenty of witchcraft discords if that's something you're into. Another Hellenic Discord is Hellenic Herald, which I am in. See which one that you like or if you want to join both of them. There's also plenty of pagan servers. I'm not super plugged into ones that aren't witchcraft related because I am, believe it or not, on a couple. Well, I'm only on one witchcraft server anymore because Discord got overwhelming. I'm on the Hearth Witch server. Hearth is a witchy YouTuber, and the Hearth server has like plenty of spaces for different pagan paths to communicate. People will sometimes share where they hang out primarily. Also, check out the linked servers in both Hellenic Herald and Eros Alliance, because they have other Hellenic-based Discord servers as well as other pagan servers, even really niche ones like Gallo-Roman servers, so check those out. How do you make the most out of your online community, right? That is a big concern. One of the biggest ways to connect with your community is to really engage in the rituals. I actually used to run a bunch of Hellenism rituals. I've experienced a bit of ritual fatigue, so I've stopped for a bit, but Eros Alliance does do rituals and festivals and celebrate the festivals, so that's a really great way to get plugged in. They do things like poetry contests, play readings, they stream Greek plays. It's a really great way to integrate the online with the personal. When it comes to building a physical spiritual community, I talked about this in my video 11 things, I think, I don't remember the number, that I learned about Hellenism that I wish I knew as a beginner. One of the things I said is community is the point. Hellenism is inherently a community-based religion. All of the festivals are community-based, which is why I encourage you to get involved in one of the Discords and do those. It's really hard to do festivals truly solitary. This religion was built to build up the polis, build up the city. There are ways to be a solitary pagan, but there are certain things like processions and all of that that's not quite the same when you're alone. Online community is important, but it's also important to go outside and engage in your local community. One way of doing that is dedicating a certain communal activity to a deity. I'm a part of an environmental group, and that feeds me spiritually. Even though that group obviously is focused around environmentalism and practical action, we don't worship gods, but there is a spiritual aspect to Mother Earth. There's a spiritual aspect to actions and taking to the streets or making art. For me, I dedicate a protest to Athena, for example, when I am with them and I form these meaningful connections. If I'm writing letters to someone in prison for environmental justice, I'm writing that and I'm thanking Hermes for allowing me to write to this person, or dedicating the art to Apollo and the Muses. That really feeds me spiritually. Another thing that might come as a surprise to people is that I go to some Catholic events. One of my best friends who I live with is Italian American, and they have really introduced me to this sense of community and invited me into parts of that community. One of those things that is so meaningful to me are saint processions. The area that I'm in, there's a lot of saint processions, and while I'm not Catholic and probably never will be, it's something that is so reminiscent of ancient Greek and ancient Roman festivals. I mean, that's literally where these processions come from. Some of them are literally processing in the motherland, processing saints from the temple where the ancient Greco-Roman deities, except now it's a saint. It's a fine line, right? I don't look at the saint and pretend that they're a pagan deity. I don't think that's appropriate to do that, but it fills an aspect of me spiritually where I'm able to experience this and engage in this practice while also not feeling like a fraud. I'm looking over there because I actually got a rose yesterday from the Santa Teresa procession, because I started the Viva Santa Teresa chant, and I was given this rose by one of the people who was carrying her. And so to me, it is so spiritually fulfilling to be in a group of people chanting. I like to go to Christmas Eve services at an Episcopal church. Obviously, I'm not a Christian, but my ancestors were Episcopalians. My great-great-grandfather was an Episcopal minister who lived on this farm. It was super important to my great-grandfather and my grandfather. As a way of honoring my ancestors, I like to go to the Christmas Eve service. I've talked about this before. I find Episcopal services really nice because it's very ritualistic. The main thing is when I go up for communion, I just cross my arms and get a blessing, because I don't think it's appropriate for me to get communion because I'm not a Christian, but I still think the blessing is important. The reverend at the church is always happy to see me. He doesn't try to convert me or anything. He's just so sweet. It's the rituals of sitting up, standing down, singing the doxology, kneeling, getting the blessing. The ritual aspect of it to me is an important part of my ancestral practice. With the saints, it's my way of honoring ancestors of place. They actually will come to my workplace to receive a blessing from my workplace. So again, that's a way that I connect with the local community. Now, how do you meet witchy friends in real life? That is a question that I get asked a lot. I'm going to say that 100% depends on where you live. I have been all over America, except for Hawaii and Alaska, and there are pagans in every single state. There are not pagans in every single city. I find that generally pagans will exist within or around the major city of that area. So for example, Fredericksburg, Virginia, which I have been to a lot, there are so many pagans in Fredericksburg, Virginia. I find that a lot of local craft fairs, you will find people with witchy merchandise, and those people you can strike up a conversation. My camera died and I can't find the tripod that I use for it. Anyway, so I would say check out places that offer tarot readings. Now, it's not like if you find a house that's psychic here, that's not the same. If you are going to an event where they are hosting a tarot reader, like little markets or something, that would be the place to go, because psychic, they generally are by appointment or a single person, and they're not going to really be plugged in necessarily in the way that you would want them to be. But if you're going to local markets, that is a really good place to find a local witch or a local pagan and engaging with them. Another thing is finding a metaphysical shop. Obviously, many metaphysical shops can be New Age based, but not all of them are, and some of them host events, so you could look at the events. A witchy art fair is a great place to find local pagans. I also tend to find that we pagans tend to be drawn to certain hobbies. You could try a local D&D group, a local LARPing group. D&D tends to attract a lot of witchy people. They attract pagans, they attract people of alternative lifestyles. So that is a good place to meet some people. LARPing, again, is a big hobby that has a lot of pagans. I have met many pagans who are in LARPing. Another thing is theater. Theater is a great place to meet potentially witchy pagan people. I mean, I went to a theater school, and that's where I got introduced to things. I met two separate pagans at a show. When it comes to talking to people about that, right, you don't want to just go like, hi, my name's Felicity. I'm a Hellenic polytheist, unless you're me here on this YouTube channel. But you could subtly wear a Celtic knot or an Athena necklace. If you're really shy, like I am actually pretty shy when it comes to introducing myself to people in that regard, by wearing something that you are inviting in conversation, if that's something that you want to invite in. You can also look for jewelry on other people. I met a Celtic pagan and I saw that she had a symbol on her neck, and I asked her about it, and then lo and behold, now we're having a conversation. If you're at an art market and you see people with Greek deity drawings, that's a great way to have that discussion. Another good place is Renaissance fairs. I have met so many pagans at Renaissance fairs. Obviously, be careful, especially if Norse paganism looking out for Nazis, which they are unfortunately at Renaissance fairs. But generally, if they're not Nazis, they make that very well known. Those are all ways that you can physically find other pagans. Another way that you can cope is allowing your praxis to be flexible. Even though I am not a witch, and I am very specifically a Hellenic polytheist, I will celebrate with witches, and I will celebrate with other pagans, and that can be a beautiful way of cultural crossover and cultural sharing. When I did a ritual with a witch, I opened it by calling to Hermes Psychopompus, because we were doing stuff on Halloween, and then she lit herbs and called in the circles. It was actually this really beautiful way of mixing things in and connecting with others. Allow yourself to practice with other people. It's not the same, obviously, as being with another Hellenic polytheist, but can still be a quite beautiful way of interacting. That is my conclusion of this video. Please pop down below if you have any questions, comments, or any ways that you personally deal with loneliness if you are solitary or even like primarily solitary. If you're not solitary, tell us about that. Share with us down below, and thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Shout out to my patrons, $5 and up, are Narco Witch, Annie Nagel, Akeda Hakubi, Little Raven, Mitchies Porcius, Nathan Bell, Thistle, and Tiny Atlas.